So I'm going to work on the doc manager class. I just asked ChatGPT what's the approach it thinks is best. So I'm gonna listen to this approach here, and I'm probably gonna do this one to design the class base, thinking about it as the roots of the scene. But there's also this that I saw a long time ago, which is a plugin on Godot. But the downside of this one is that it's on GDScript. And from what I remember, it's kind of confusing to understand the code. So, but the first time that I saw, it was exactly what I was looking for. So this another question is whether or not to make it each doc should have tabs or to put the tabs inside of the components. I think it's probably better to make the tabs inside of the components and then to make the doc just base maybe a control class and then a split container between them. I'm gonna have to. I didn't spend any time thinking about this, so I'm gonna start thinking about it now. I think I'm gonna start by creating a different function here and just commenting this other function out, because I think that's the easiest way to already had the beginning of the class, let's say, here. Because I was gonna do this before, and then I realized that it's actually more difficult than it seems. It's not that it's difficult, it's that it's just very confusing because of the way that the layout works. Like to think about the layout on the code is very confusing. How it's gonna look like because of the split containers. So like every time you put like the split container logic is based on the children. So every time you add another split, like you're basically creating a tree data structure, and then you have to think about like the splits. And from last time, I remember I was thinking about like creating a tree of two different types. One is the split, the other one is the space, and it's very similar to volume bounding hierarchy boxes, or basically boxes to divide the space to run physics simulation. Like it's kind of similar kind of thing that is going on. But this one is in two dimensions, so you're dividing the space by two every time you add a new doc. And I remember it was very complicated to think about this. So I think I'm just gonna try to start or just writing codes on the class there and seeing what happens. So probably create another project on the editor and then create the class a little bit, then create the project or test the class on the project. This is the easiest way to do this. I'm just gonna delete this stuff because I'm probably not gonna need it. I might have to delete everything else though, which is might gonna be annoying. So maybe it's easier to create another name there. I'm gonna create another name. This function that I have here is that because I'm creating things from code because I think it's better. I'm trying to create things like maybe I'll change my mind eventually, but for now I think it's better to do this. So this function is like the function that I'm calling, I think, from the other parts. It's been a long time. I think I finished everything on the file system, but also not 100% sure like if there are gonna be other. Yeah, there's always more stuff you can add. So I was thinking about adding like an icon with the gear for the settings on the file system and some other stuff to like show the loading of files and stuff like that. But I think it's probably gonna be better to do this way later once I have other stuff. Because I think these kinds of things is probably better to get a sense of what's gonna be important to have or to implement as you use the thing. That's how I'm thinking about it. So yeah, I think it's probably better to use it first. Then as I use, I'm gonna be able like it's gonna become very clear like what which kinds of things are annoying me that I should put. And I think up until that point, it's gonna take a very long time probably. So I'm running from this one. Like this is the main function that runs there on the setup to create the scene. Then I think I'm gonna do the project settings displays for like the overall settings for all of them is just on the same one here on top, so it doesn't matter. And I can run for building multiple scenes at the same time. But I think it's probably easier now to just build one. But this is the function that I was running, and I think this one runs the other one. I'll put some music for myself. See if it's streaming. It's probably better to get the thing working first. Yeah, so this one I also am not really sure what is the best way to do this. Because initially I was thinking about creating a file for each scene, but I think it might be a waste of time. Then obviously depends on how large the code is. But I think now I have a more like clear picture of how things are gonna look like. So I think that's unlikely that the scene code is gonna be very large because it's gonna force me the way that the engine is designed and everything is designed is gonna force me to put the logic inside of the classes. So it's very likely that the logic outside of the classes to connect everything is gonna be large. So it's probably gonna be very small. I'm just gonna put here now because obviously I'm just gonna test as well. So I think I'm just gonna put here the codes for the other one and I'm gonna comment this one out. Yeah, that's easier. So I'm gonna use this one to, and I'm probably gonna close this one because I don't wanna mess up this one. I am using Git now to keep track of the versions, but I just like to make it easier because online. Just gonna close this file, and I wanna leave this so I don't mess up this layout, which is the one that I have there, because it is confused. So I think probably the best thing to do is to, but maybe I should leave this open because I need to think about this. So yeah, this one is the one that, well, the problem is where I'm gonna save. So I need to, hmm, don't remember why I put this here. I think that this puts the settings on the main scene. So like this is a macro that they created to set the settings or update the settings on the project settings. So this settings here, this setting here is the one that determines what is the main scene. And each project needs to have a main scene because the main scene is the scene that shows the first time that the application is open or the game is open. So I already had this doc study thing. Maybe I should remember what this is. this was, because maybe this was the one that I was using before. Yeah, so let me uncomment this. Oh, I think, yeah, this was the one. Like, I copied the editor node code, so that I just remove a bunch of stuff, and I simplified to make it work. Yeah, so I can't use this one. I'm just gonna. So I'm gonna copy this, and I'm just gonna put another name, doc manager task. Yeah, so it should create. I'm passing the name here, so it should create a scene with this name. So I'm gonna run this and see what happens. I have to return a node. I need to see if this is gonna be. So this thing that I have there is a function that creates a thing for the styling of the slider. And this is what I'm planning to do as well. Like, so I create the functions to have the things, and then maybe I can create a component in the same way like I'm creating. Obviously, it's going to be different, but it would be similar to the doc manager. Just create a class that allows you to customize themes, and then you just use the functions to set the themes on the root of the scene. I think that's easier. Because based on the way that the design works on Godot, it's gonna traverse the tree once until it gets to the root to find a custom theme, and then if it doesn't find, it's gonna use the default. I should probably use control class instead of this. I think it's. I don't remember if it's like this. Control. Because I want to see if I'm gonna be able to use. The control, because obviously this one's gonna inherit. I should just put this one actually. Now that I think about it, I should put this one already. So much over. And this is gonna be the roots. And then fine. Like this. I just run. I build the run. So I wanna study or remember how I did this one to remember the annoying parts about the layouts. So the difficult part about the class that has to work. So the thing that I'm not unsure about is the connection of signals, because it's the same problem with this one, the navbar. So like this is a class that I created to work as the options on top here. So like a navigation bar, as the name says. And this one had to be connected with the file system presenter to select the folder, or to change the state of the file system presenter based on which folder is selected. And probably on other classes is gonna happen the same thing as well, where you're gonna have to connect different classes with signals. But the problem with this is that, and this was an annoying thing that I think I solved now, but it is kind of annoying as well with the icon sidebar. So the icon sidebar is another class that I created to work as the tab here on the side that is gonna change which class shows up there when you switch the icons. Basically the same way that it works on VS Code. So depending which icon you click, it shows another container, but the container that it shows is not coupled with the class, and this is the thing that was confusing. But basically, the problem with this is that this highlights the issue that I'm thinking about with the doc manager, because this class kind of hides the other ones on its logic. So if I want to connect the signal from a class outside of this one to the other one, it becomes kind of hard to do it because I have to put the logic inside of this class, because this class is the bridge between the target class and the navbar, and I don't have access to them the moment I'm creating the function. The moment I'm creating the scene using the function. So, and I'm using this this way here to connect, because I'm creating, the moment I create the scene is different than the moment that the scene is gonna run. So it's different run times. So because of that, I have to use this different callable here. Usually they use, and I use true now, the callable MP macro, which is basically achieving a similar thing, but instead of using, the callable MP creates a custom callable that receives, creates a callable that receives a custom callable on the construct. But basically the purpose is the same thing, is to hold the state for a callback function. And I'm using this way here because this way allows you to initialize the callable with the pointer of the object the time you run. And if you try to use callable MP, it doesn't work because you have to serialize the signal, and then the moment that the signal is going to be unserialized on the editor or when you're running the application, it messes up. Or it doesn't even, I don't remember which one it is, but I think it probably doesn't even allow you to register with callable MP. But it's one of these two reasons. So basically, I use this signal here with this flag to be able to serialize the signal and connect the signal the moments that I build the function, that I build the scene, which is different than the moment that the scene is going to run. And because of this, I need to have, in the moment this function runs, there needs to be a connection between the nav pointer and the icon tab. Not the icon tab, the class that the icon tab is going to be changing. So this is the problem. Like the reason why I can't connect the signal directly is because the icon tab is the class that has the logic to create the other class. And it's basically the same issue, I think, with the doc manager, is that, and this is what I'm thinking about, like, because this is going to change the implementation of the class. So like if you make the doc manager, if you design the doc manager having in mind that it's always going to be the roots of the scene, then it's probably going to be one type of logic. But if you design it in a way that is part of the scene, then it's going to be another logic. And I think the main difference is going to be in the way that you connect the signals with the different nodes. So this is one of the things that I was asking GPT there, but I think that it's not going to be very good, the answer probably, because it's kind of hard to, like, I can't give all the context that I have here to ChatGPT. I need to talk about a lot more things. But the issue that I realize, so this class is kind of confusing because what I am coupling with this class is a scroll container, which is going to be a wrapper around the content node. So like you can imagine like this stuff here. This component is decoupled from the icon sidebar class. So I can put the component whatever place in the scene I want. All I have to do is just select the name, which is this name that I chose here. So all I have to do is set the name of the node to this name here, and then I'm going to be able to change its content based on this class here, because this class uses this one to change the children. And I'm coupling the content scroll container on this class because it's easier, and this is a scroll container that is going to wrap the content. So like in case, because different contents are going to have different widths and heights, so in case they overflow, just to make sure that they're going to be visible. At least for now, I think that's probably going to work. And I had the problems, like I had some problems that I don't remember really well, but because of the way that the contents, that the scroll bar container works. But it seems to be working now. So it's based on minimum size, but that's the reason why I decided to couple this class here with this one. But it is kind of confusing. And the thing that I was confused is that only the scroll container is coupled with the icon sidebar. The content is not coupled. So the contents, I still can connect signals to the content or to the doc, I think, because the doc is like the wrapper of the class, which is basically this one on this situation. So like on this changes the layout of the scene because and this is the part that I'm not sure about. So the reason why I thought about this again is because like just like VS Code, if I wanted to change the position of these elements here to the right, because by default VS Code is on the left, the display of the files. So if I want to change to the right, it's going to change obviously the relationship between the position of the icon sidebar and the position of the container, because now they are side by side. And I was thinking about like whether or not I would have to change the logic of the class to change that, but then I realized that this is probably not the case because I think that the structure on the layout of the scene is being done outside based on the way that I connect these two different classes on a wrapper thing. Which I think is this content div here, but I don't remember. So that it seems that the icon is on the body, and then so I create the section based on the body. So like, yeah, I think that's like I'm separating by two. The icon sidebar is like its own thing, and then I have the body, which is gonna be the thing that takes the split containers. So this is the kind of the challenge because like let's say obviously on the doc manager is not going to be fixed. So let's say I want to move the whole components. How do I do the coupling? That's a kind of problem. Do I view them as the same thing and then I move the whole thing and then I change the position of each one inside it? Or do I view the icon sidebar as its own doc? I think that's probably easier to do. So view icon sidebar as its own doc. But then it might change because of the way that the classes work, and you have to think about like how the pattern is going to be. So basically, how do you draw the line between what's going to be a dockable container and what's going to be a hard parts of the layout of the scene? I think in this situation, for example, the navbar is like its own thing in the way that I was thinking about. I don't want the navbar to be a dockable container, but maybe that's better as well. I'm not sure. But I think it's probably better to make it fixed on the top. And obviously these decisions are going to change. This way of thinking is going to change the structure of the class. But I do think that just basically, intuitively, I think it makes more sense to make the doc manager as the root of the scene. Because it makes it easier to think about. But then, like, how is it gonna work? That's kind of the issue. Because the other thing is that in order to serialize the information, you need to make everything based on the state of the class. That can be cached based on the add property macro. It has to be basically cached on the scene. So I don't think that so it probably makes more sense to make it as the root, but then to add add the children to the container outside of the class. Which is basically what I'm doing here. So I would just change to make it the base here. I create this function on the node class because the thing only caches or only serializes the nodes that have an owner, and I think the owner has to be the root of the sink. So the normal add child wasn't working for the way that I'm building the sink here because of this difference in runtime. So I have to create another function that sets the owner as I add the child, and that's basically the difference. And I couldn't just put everything inside of the node because then it creates, you would create two classes. It was another issue, but so on this one I was having a problem, and this is the part that is kind of annoying because of the way that Godot works. Is that like here I'm using this hash map to keep track of when I initialize the nodes, I use this hash map to get them. And now I think I put on a function. I remember I changed, yeah, so is it this one? Yeah. So I was doing on the constructor and then I changed to this function. And then this one's basically looping over a directory that I'm gonna have on the project, so just standard name. It's gonna use the names of the files that I put there, which is gonna be the same names as the names of the classes that I want to put. And then for each class that I add, this is like parts of the annoying parts. Like is the main fundamental problem there is the serialization and the relationship between classes and functions. Like it's side effects and mutability, the issue. So like based on this fundamental problem, then I think it's very hard to like because it's not very clear to me either way. Like if like you redesign Godot entirely, like you will probably run into a similar issue. I think like it's not a problem with Godot's. So like another alternative would be to change the serialization system or to add stuff to the variant class as well. But I still think it would be like kind of a it's just a difficult problem like by default, by nature. So just have to spend time thinking about like in this situation I decided to kind of compromise because like I'm gonna be forced to put specific logic for specific classes on this class here because of the nature of this fundamental issue. So here I am thinking about because obviously one of the main things that I want to do is just put the file system presenter. So now I have to put like the specific names of the classes on this one. And I have to put the themes, specific themes for each one that I want. But I think it's still kind of good because you can always change, like I can always add more classes here. And the classes are just going to be options of which classes are available on the, because I still have the flexibility based on the whatever names, whatever icons I put inside of this folder on the project. So the icons inside of the project determine what kind of classes are going to be shown on the component. And then I hard code the logic for each name of the class to select each icon that I choose for the class. And these ones I added to the default theme, which is basically done here. So this is the themes, the initialization of the default theme, and you can just add icons based on the name, and you get the CFG, and these icons here are going to be done through a function that they have there to generate the stuff on build time. So like they parse the files and puts in bytes based on the build time logic. But it doesn't matter that much. You can just, because obviously, I spent some time looking into this some time ago. This function here basically, and it's based on scones they have the logic on as construct and some files to create to generate a file on build time that is gonna have the bytes that represent the SVG formats, and then they have these classes that allow you to get the data and set as an icon as a texture to the on the thing. So all you have to do basically is just put the name. This icon name would be like the name of the class, but I'm just putting these default icons so that I know that those are the icons that I added later. But I think normally if you want to add to specific classes, you just put the name of the class you want here. And this one would be the name of the property, I think. And then there is some macros that they use to subscribe this thing stuff on the class as well. I don't remember really well how it works, but I think what I'm gonna do is just every time that I wanna add a new class there to the icon sidebar, I just search an icon that I think makes sense for that class, and I just put on the so I can search for the files just based on the name there, the SVG. So it's gonna be on the scene theme icons, and then the editor icons are obviously for the editor thing. So so the weird thing about this class is that I'm adding children dynamically to the target content, and then it's based on whether or not the target content exists. and the target content I'm finding based on the root node, which is the owner of this, based on the name that is selected on here. So like this, the component class is decoupled from the sidebar class, and because of that, because it's I'm dynamically adding the nodes to the target. There is an issue when you shut down the engine, because the engine automatically removes the memory for nodes that are part of the scene tree. So I haven't spent too much time, but I assume that it just traverses the scene tree, and then for each one, for each node, it's gonna call the notification, passing the part of the cycle, like the I think post delete or something like that. So it calls that function for all the nodes, and then after that, it just deletes the memory for each one. But because I'm adding programmatically here, they may or may not be on the sync tree, but they're and then based on whether or not they are on the sync tree, they're going to be on the hash map here or not. And this is the thing, because like on this hash map, they are kind of decoupled from the sync tree, I think. So yeah, when I add the nodes to the hash, I'm adding them here. So this is the moment that I initialize the nodes using the class DB functions. So they are gonna be on the hash map 100% of the time, I think, but they're not gonna be on the sync tree 100% of the time. So if I delete them from the hash map, then on some situations I'm gonna get a dangling pointer because they were already deleted by the sync tree function or sync tree logic because they were added as a child of the content scroll container. And I think that's doing this stuff here solves this, but I'm not 100% sure. It is kind of one of the things that's kind of annoying to deal with. And I do think that this is like a side effect of the fundamental problem that I talked about before, which I think is going to happen a lot. But I don't see a very good way to solve this that is not going to take massive amounts of time. So, but here if I check, like I'm only removing the nodes if this does not exist. Yeah. So if the contents scroll container was not put on the scene because you couldn't find the target name, it is a kind of weird thing. I'm not really sure why it's happening, because theoretically you should be finding each time, because I do have on the scene a node with this name, but I assume it's probably something to do with the cycle or whatever. Like at some point, so whatever is going on is not gonna have the target content, and because of that, it doesn't have the content scroll container. So on those situations, I just delete each node from the hash. But if this exists on the scene, then I don't need to delete, so it doesn't hit this and it doesn't complain about memory, as far as I seeing right now. But it is kind of an annoying thing. So I have to include this. Oh, there's also, so there's two different things that I can look for to try to clarify how to do this. So one is this project here that has the plugin, and the other one is a editor node implementation. I think I'm just gonna close everything because kind of done with the file system. Probably gonna have to go back to the file system. I didn't fully test some of the app changes functionalities, but it doesn't matter that much to me now. So I think it's more important to solve. I was kind of getting tired as well of working on that class alone. So I think it's better to move on to the other stuff and then come back later if I. The thing that's I'm thinking about is that it's probably like a lot more important to get to the point. I think it's much better to work on things by using the thing. So I think getting to the point where you use is probably the highest priority, because then it becomes very clear what's important to work on or not. So I think that's probably what I should be doing. I'm just trying to get to the point where I have the whole scene, and then I can start using the scene. And as soon as I start using, it's gonna become very clear what stuff I need to do. So the editor node has a, I forgot the name, but it has two different classes, but they do things based on tabs as well. So this is the part I'm not really sure. I'm probably not going to do it this way because I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes more sense to add tabs as part of each class. So because like a lot of like the more generic something is, the less specific it's going to be, obviously. So like tabs are something that adds like a specific element to a class. So I think it doesn't make sense to add them to something like a doc manager, because if you do add them, then you need to have an option, a Boolean variable that determines whether or not it's gonna the component's gonna be is gonna include tabs or not. But maybe it is better to include and then put the Boolean, because you can have two different levels of docs. So I think it's more about the line, which is gonna be based on the contents, obviously. So like there is one kind of like situation where you need, or it makes sense to have tabs, which is when the component itself is gonna require tabs. And then there's another situation is when you want to have multiple different components on a single doc. So for that situation, I think it makes sense to put the tabs, because it is basically what happens on the inspector, on the editor. So you have three different options of what you can show there, and the three different options are viewed as their own classes. But then you have another situation where you have a class. It's basically changing where you're coupling the logic. And I do think that depending on the circumstance, you're gonna have the two different ones. So you're gonna have situations where you're coupling the logic, like you're making the logic based on the connection of the different classes, or where you want to put different classes on the same spots, the same doc container. And another situation where the tabs are parts of the container itself, the logic of the container. So maybe it is better to put tabs and then make a Boolean to determine whether or not to show them. So I think on the terminal it's going to be parts of the, it makes more sense to make it parts of the doc, the class itself. But maybe on other, maybe it is better to. So maybe I should try to do it with both. But the way that this is here is kind of confusing to understand. And they have, inside of this doc manager, I think, they have another class that is the one that, I think, yes, this is one, doc context popup, is the one that shows the little spots on each doc. But I think the main difference between the way that they did it here is that they did it thinking about a fixed position. So like the doc works well for the specific case of the editor. There's like a predetermined amounts of different split containers and stuff like that. So it's not exactly what I'm trying to do. I want to do more generic thing that's, you can just put whatever class you want, and you can reposition the classes based on whatever you want to do. So I think that this one's probably not, is like further away from what I want than this one. I think this one's closer to what I want. But this one is in GDScript and this one is on C++. So I'm gonna run the, just wanna make sure that I don't fuck this up. Oh, am I complaining because of the node here? But I think it probably not, because, or maybe it will actually. I was doing node here. No, but here I'm doing a panel and then I'm returning a panel. Maybe because of the casting is gonna complain. But I think it doesn't matter. So it should create a scene with this name. Nice. So we did create here. So I'm gonna open from the editor to see how it looks like. I did create a class or a project to to test the GUIs as well, because of the loading spinner. So maybe I could use that one as well. Yeah, but this was something that I realized as well that I was doing in the beginning is that creating a new project for each thing that I want to test and doesn't make a lot of sense. Makes a lot more sense to create a different scene each time that I want to test something. I think for the GUI probably makes sense because a different class of things. I think for now, and for all the stuff related to creating scenes from codes, I think I'm just gonna create different scenes. So this is the scene. So I think that it is working. The other one is the layout, like a copy of the layout from the editor node, with different classes. I, I didn't put the classes on the editor because they are not registered on class B, so that it doesn't work true unless you change them. And this is the difference, like on the slider here. The reason why it looks like this here and looks like the other one on the other scene is because of the theme. It looks like this. So the thing about this, so it does look like it is. So pretty sure that this inherits from control. I think it's probably better to make it work with control because it's like less. Not sure if opinionated is the correct way to put it. Like obviously, like if it's gonna be the parent of each thing, I think it's the least amount of stuff. So control, maybe node is better than control. I think node is gonna be. Obviously, I can create another class later if I want to as well. I'm gonna think about the current thing that I'm doing, and then I think about it later. The way that I'm planning on putting the 3D world is this kind of connectional class here that I saw before that it works. So just put a sub viewport container and then sub viewport no 3D, and this would be like the 3D world inside of the GUI scene. So I'm gonna read the ChatGPT stuff there, I think. And I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking about what to do here. What you do and how to test. Maybe I should write down the questions that I have and then try to clarify each one. The thing is like figuring out the best approach to do first is the hard part. I think I should probably start with. I should separate like. Yeah, but then if it separates, I think probably the main. There is a question that is like almost on the top of my mind, but it's not very clear. It's like, is the distinction between the fixed parts and dynamic parts. It's like if the class is gonna be the roots of the scene, because the obvious examples are I think the nav bar is probably the best example because the icon sidebar I think it would probably be good to allow to change the position as well. But I guess this is the kind of because it's not really And the problem is, so I think one of the questions would be, what should be the structure of a doc? So it should be split container. Because the problem is that the split container makes its logic based on the children. So in order to create the split, you need two children. And then what split container and controls, maybe? So like each doc would be a split container and two control nodes. And then you have fixed parts. So I think that I should have like fixed, like I should have like fixed components and dynamic components. Then fixed components would be classes that don't necessarily need to be a doc, but because they're going to be children of the doc manager, I can do the logic to switch them just by finding the thing by the name. I should have a function. I should probably have a function. So maybe like what data structure to use to keep track of dockable. I want to read GPT to think more about this. I think that the thing that I was thinking about the fixed components is that like if you think about the doc manager as only managing the like split containers, then it becomes a lot easier to think about. So like it becomes a lot easier to think about the doc manager as a subset of the whole scene. So like I could have, for example, the navbar and the icon sidebar as fixed parts of the scene, and then I put the doc manager as the other parts, which would be like the content part of the scene. And then on that part you have only split containers on control nodes. And thinking about that, I think it makes it a lot easier to think about the doc manager. So it makes it easier to think about it as part of the whole scene and not as the root. But I'm not sure if that's the best. Yeah, now that I think about it, it might be better to make it as a part of the scene because it makes it easier to like think about the whole scene before you do it. So like basically, obviously, the question you're gonna ask is which parts of the scene I want to be static and what parts I want to be switchable. And then based on that, you encapsulate the switchable parts on the doc manager and the static parts on site. I think from that standpoint, it makes it easier to think about. But the problem with this one, I think, is that like the advantage of doing as a root is that I think it simplifies the way you add the nodes, probably. I think it simplifies the way you switch the nodes because the problem with not making part of the is the same problem that I had with the icon sidebar. I think the issue is when you need to because like this kind of things here I don't like. Like here I have to I have to get the roots. So there's 2 points of failure here that can be like a problem depending on the circumstance because it's like volatile. Like let's say for whatever reason the owner is not the correct one, then it would fuck up things and maybe it's not a problem on compile time. So it would be hard to figure out. So this is one potential thing that is very annoying. And the other one is obviously this one, like I relied based on the name. Like because I'm dynamically adding the nodes as on this class here, it increases the probability that you're gonna have a situation in the future that causes problems, which is very annoying. So I don't like this very much. And for that reason, I think that probably doing this is the good side of doing the doc manager as the root of the nodes or the root of the thing, because I think that it would be less of this happening. So one way that I'm thinking about now is like imagining if I make it as part of as the root of the thing. So it would probably have a function. So you can add the nodes on the constructor because then you constrain the class obviously. So like the I couldn't run anything that's like only the basic layout maybe I would run as part of the. So like instead of putting this stuff here outside, I would make it part of the put this stuff on the constructor outside of the thing because the thing has to be done outside. But these parts here I would put on the constructor. But I think I can put anything else. So I would probably have a function to, because obviously each thing is going to be different. So I can add the nodes as children on the constructor. So I'll probably have a function that adds the node as children. And I would create this here, and I would have to think about a different name probably. And then I would probably use add child external inside of the doc manager to add that node as a child of the doc manager. So maybe this would work because it's the same, basically the same logic. But then I would have to add all the nodes to this one, which might be very annoying. Oh, actually, maybe not, because this is basically the same thing. As soon as I add the child to this one, it's gonna have the other ones by proxy. So like it wouldn't change anything by the structure of how to build this thing. Because the only difference, like, it would be actually basically the same. So yeah, but then yeah, the difference is that I wouldn't need to get the owner and then get the children from the owner. Because I could just get by name and then I could have a function, I think, that determines like that I can pass the name as an argument and then search for the name. So another thing that makes it easier to think about. So like if I do this, for example, that to create a root, then it's easier to think about if I just think about switching the positions based on the like an index. So every time I add a child, but then it wouldn't work, I think. It would it can work based on the way you traverse the tree, but it would have to be a function. To make it easier, you would have to. I could have a function that subscribes the elements that I want to move on the scene as a docs on the doc manager, and then every time that I call the function, you would cache on the state of the class the index of that position, and then I'll just find that I would find a node on the. I think that the ready. I could call on the ready because the ready runs after all the nodes were added to the tree, I think. So the only difference it would be that I wouldn't find the root nodes. I would just find the node by name based on the whatever nodes are registered. So like I could have the data structure inside the class. Then based on that, the data structure would depend on the function that runs to subscribe the docs. Then based on that, like I can have a hash map, for example, of the index or the name of the class or whatever name I want to put there and the position on the indexes of the docs. So I would call that function and subscribe the docs to the doc manager, and then based on that data structure, I would find the nodes and find it like, let's say to switch the position. You just find the node on the tree based on the index that you have. And maybe the problem with hash maps is you can't cache on the Steam file unless you use a dictionary. But I think it's probably worth to use the dictionary. Actually, if you do it based on the string name, so the name of the class, then probably it would work. So like it's easier to think about the containers outside of the split containers, stuff like that. So like to think about just the components as dockable things, because then you don't have to think about how adding another dock would have to change the layout of the scene by adding a split container and adding two children node to create the split. So it simplifies if I leave that logic outside and then I just subscribe whatever I want to be the doc. So like the difference would be, for example, that I would create here, like I would create a split container here, and then I would subscribe this class to the doc. So base subscribe. And this is the part that I'm not sure, because the thing about relying on the name is that it can be, unless I put a fixed name for each one, maybe I have something like they do on the pop-up menu, where every time you call a function, it gets like it's inside of the logic of the function to keep track of each thing. But I'm not really sure because like how do you make sure when it's running the scene if it's gonna work? I don't think I like that approach that much. Anything that seems that you have to rely on things that might be different depending on circumstances is probably not very good. Like relying on the name of the node, I think is an example of that. Because if you don't set the name, then Godot has a default strategy to put the name of the node. But even though I think it's probably going to be guaranteed to be the same every time you run the function, it's not something that I want to rely on. So but the function inside of the doc is going to be very easy. To switch the nodes, you just find the nodes on the tree. Find the source node and find the target nodes. Or like, obviously, find the two nodes that want swap. And then you just change, you get the parents and you change them. So it shouldn't be very hard to do this. Because the function it might be annoying to implement the drag and drop with the thing though. think this is one of the things that makes it very confusing. Like depending on the order you put the split containers, it completely changes the layouts of the scene. I think this one is the like one of the things that is very hard to think about. Because it's different than the thing here as well, because I'm gonna start. But here they have an option to save the layout you got at the end. I think this one's a very good starting point to think about. So maybe I should copy these codes to translate the code into C++ by copying, like copying part by part and then translating. There's also the drag and drop thing. So I think I have to think about the like what I'm gonna use to change the containers. So I think I'm gonna probably try to implement similar thing to the doc context thing. Gibby. With it's like it has rectangles. It's, it's basically a square with rectangles that allow you to select. So I'm gonna both do this and do the drag and drop functionality. Uses the macro. So I have to think about probably obviously I think this one should be easier to implement first. Just this one. I think it's here. Yeah, so basically this component here. I think this is done by the doc context. So I have to see how they do the layout. So this. So maybe I should create another class before I create this, and I should create this class here. So the way that I'm thinking about it is that I'm gonna make the doc manager as the root, but I'm not gonna force all the components to be parts of the doc manager. So I think that the best strategy is probably to make it so that you add fixed components in the same way to the as children to root doc manager, and then you add dockable components. So you add everything as you add everything the same way, but if you want, so add everything the same way. But if you want components to be dockable, you have a function or something that allows the dock contacts or drag and drop functionality to switch the nodes on the scene. This is probably the best approach. I think it's simple. And this one has to be, so the logic that subscribes them has to be based on the state of the class. It has to be based on variance because it's going to be something that is cached, is serialized on the scene file. So I'm thinking about like subscribe functions or something like this that puts the components on this element here. So I think I need to think about to build this first, this element first. And I'm thinking about making this as an option like on the top here, which would be layout or something like this. Yeah, so this is another problem because like if I put the option here, then how I'm going to connect, because this is obviously a different class. So like how do I connect? So maybe it has to be separated. Obviously it's going to be through signals. Yeah. So I think that the drag and drop functionality is coupled with the doc manager class, but the context one is going to be on the navbar. So I have to see how to connect that, the logic. So like obviously it's going to be done through signals. So I'm going to make the class. So it's going to be information like either an integer or a string name or something like that. That's passed as a signal from the navbar to the doc. Then based on that, the doc is going to have on its state it's going to cache the information of what components are dockable, and it's going to yeah. But then like how do I know? I think the moment yeah, this is kind of because I need to make sure to synchronize. So like this is the difference between this one that I have here and the one that I'm thinking about doing. Like the docs are going to be dependent on how many components are dockable. So like each time that I subscribe, I have to synchronize the ones on this class here and the ones on the navbar. But maybe it's possible if I connect them through the function that creates the sync. But I'm not really sure if that's a good design. Because every time that I subscribe a doc on the doc manager, it has to be also subscribed on this class. And I think they are going to be decoupled because I have to put this class here as part of the navbar and not on the doc manager. So I think this is the first thing that I need to think about. So I'm going to try to simplify. I'm going to delete the stuff that I have. So probably focus on build doc context first. I'm gonna put these steps on the other thing there. So I'm gonna think about these questions and figure out what I need to do first. So after I have this, this goes into the So like this is basically the same. It's connected. I have to think about how what is the best way to connect the doc contacts with the. So I'm thinking that this way to start things is gonna be easier. So first, I just think about the components as in the way that they are, and I don't put the logic on the doc manager. The doc manager is just going to be a class that changes the nodes, depending on whether or not they were subscribed, changes the positions of the nodes on the scene. Because that way is a lot easier to think about because I don't have to think about the structure of the split container with the nodes, the children. So like I can create each component's logic outside of the doc manager and then just subscribe that to the doc manager. The downside of this is the boundary. So like it forces me to put the logic, but maybe it's not that big of a deal, I think. Because like obviously the way that the thing shows depends on the split container and what things are put on the split container. So I think let me go over this stuff here. So this would be, I think, that the main container of the whole scene. This is directly added to the base. Then this one is split between the navbar, which is the fixed thing on top. Navbar has a margin, so the margin has the nav, which is the actual class. So the main container has the body. So the main container splits the body, which is the thing that is going to have all the container, with the navbar, which is the fixed bar on the top of the scene. So the body is the thing that has. I thought about it in the same way that you think about a website. So that's why I put the name body, I think. So body is going to be just like the name says. It's going to be this stuff on the middle. So this one has the fixed icon sidebar as the first children. And then it has the content div, which is going to be where the file system is located, the simulation stuff, and the tax stuff. So this one is the first split container on the body. So I'm adding a split container first to the body. Then I add the file system doc to that split container. So I'm dividing like the first half there. I'm dividing like I'm dividing this part between the two here first. So I add the sidebar first to the body. So the body is the whole thing here. And I add this one first, and then I create the split between this one and this one first, which I think is the first one that I saw there. And the file system doc here. So this content div here is the division between the file. Name's kind of confusing because I changed a bunch of times, I think. But this split container here is gonna be this one here, dividing. Then the file system doc is this one. And I think that this is There's another, yeah, this is the part that is confusing. So I have to add another split container because the division on the bottom here. So this one would be this one. I think this is the part that is kind of hard to think about because every time, depending on where you add the split container, is going to be horizontal or vertical. But obviously, you can use the V split container or H split container, which changes this. But I think it's easier to think, like, it's better to think about like as a kind of like its own structure if you're going to think about the doc manager. So if I think about the doc manager as stuff that divides the thing with split containers, then I need to think about it as a like kind of like a its own thing. Then every time you switch something on the scene, it changes that thing. If that makes sense. And then on this one, I add another one, I think. Yeah, so here, this one here is probably this panel split here, because I'm setting as vertical here. So I think this one is this one actually. So this one is this one, but it is a child. So like, it's dividing. The first divide there that happened is between this thing here and the rest of the thing. Then this ID 3D split is this one, and then this panel split is this one. So like you have a child of a. Maybe it's easier. Yeah. So here. I have this, and this is the part that is confusing. I think it's the way you add. This one is a split container. I have another split container as a child. Then I have another one because this one's going to divide. So every time you want a division, you need to add a split container, and you need to put the two children, otherwise it doesn't show the division. But to put that on its own thing is the part that's kind of confusing. So I think it's probably better to start with the way that I'm thinking about there. Then after I do that, then I think about like yeah, this is the best way to do it, I think. So first I start by thinking about what's gonna change the containers. Then I think about what's gonna or how to switch the nodes and keep the logic outside of the nodes. Then after I do that and I see that it works, then I think about whether or not it's worth it to make the components should be their container class, which would be like a split container with two children, and then change that. Yeah, so I think that's the thing that I realize now. That I remember. It's like the approach that I'm thinking about now is different because I'm thinking about like building the scene from the components that I already have. But the approach that I was thinking about before is like building the structure, the layout of class, which with specific names, and then putting the components on those names. Then changing the names, which are the target nodes. But I think I think I can get there through this approach. It might be easier. So first I build the structure, then after that I create the class to create the dockable containers. Then I select specific names for each doc or an index or something like that. And then I put the components based on the index. It's like the logic of the doc manager would have in the beginning the structure of the layout, and then I would add the nodes on those positions instead of doing the other way around. It might be easier to do this in the beginning. Yeah, but I'm gonna probably study the doc context now. I think I'm gonna try to get or to copy as much as possible to create this layout here or this layout here with the docs, or to see how to do the GUI. Mm. So depending on which one you select, you can change by and drag. Yeah, and drag. So you can't put on the bottom there. Yeah, nice. So it's the three dots, and then whatever one you select, you can change based on the layout. Sure. So I'm gonna try to create this layout first. So I'm gonna create another class. I'm gonna split this into different things. Yeah, I'm gonna put this as an option on the navbar first. So I'm gonna copy the code that I have for the navbar on the scene, and I'm going to put this code on the thing that I'm trying to do there. Then once I have this, I'm going to change the I'm gonna change this ID navbar to I'm gonna create this other class, then connect this other class with this ID navbar, so that when I click an option on the navbar, it shows the context of the things. Then once I have that, I'm gonna think about how to add the logic to the class that is gonna change the nodes. So I'll be right back. So the thing that I think is hard to decide, that I was thinking about as I was taking a break, is that like the issue with changing the items is that like if you think about the doc, because I was thinking about creating another class. So you have both this class that is the doc context, which is the thing that switches the context, the GUI that represents this, and you have another class that represents what a doc is, which would be like a split container with two children. But the issue with that is that when you change the components, obviously you're only changing one of the nodes that is a children of the split container. And I think that's what it makes it difficult, because you can't really create the class by having the split container and the children, because then you couple them. So it kind of forces you to have a different structure, I think. But then like the question is like how to do this. Because if the doc is only a control, then it doesn't make any sense as well. I think the question is like what is the best way to keep track of each space on the scene and not each split container. This one. It shouldn't be that hard, I think, to change this. I think instead of making, so I'm just gonna copy this. I'm gonna change the name to have a BM prefix. I'm just gonna call BM doc contacts or BM doc. Yeah, maybe just BM doc contacts pop-up. And then I'm just gonna remove the doc manager and probably this. With this, so I think this is the thing that is gonna create the rectangles. So I think about switching the logic from doc manager to just emit a signal, and then to make the logic based on like the a value that I put here. So instead of having the max here, I put the value inside of the class, so an integer or an unsigned integer. And then when I initialize the class, the only downside is that I have to know beforehand how many dogs I want to have, because this is going to be directly added to the navbar, or I mean, it's probably going to have to be. So I have to remember how the sidebar logic or the navbar logic works. This is probably what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to run this first. And it's just running the command there, just running the function to create the scene. This is the root node of the scene, and then use this package scene to save the scene. This function here, using this stuff here. So this creates a package scene from the root nodes, and then I'm using resource saver to save the package scene, which basically creates the scene file, and then you can open from the editor. So depending on how this works, I'm gonna have to. I think this is kind of the part that is. This is another thing that I was thinking about. I was thinking a lot about in the beginning, which goes back to the exact same problem with the other classes. Like you can't really make this class generic, I think. It kind of has to be based on whatever options you want. But I think probably all the things you want to do that have this kind of style of application of game, they're gonna have layouts probably. So I think it makes sense to hard code this here. So this is the main thing here, I think. And then each one of the pop-up menus is going to be an option there. So I think I have to copy this one. And then this is the callback that happens when you select an option on this one. And the problem is that I don't want to add a pop-up. That's the thing. The question is, so I should try to add as a child. So it creates, so first, before I change this, I have to create a class. So I can add this one as, can add the class as a child. And so I think it is working, it's just not showing anything. Oh, this is the problem. So I have to, I'm gonna change, choose set here. And I think that the settings on the project are here. No, this is the export settings. It wasn't here. Yeah, it's gonna be the project Godot file. So the question is why it's not changing. Fish. So maybe you should just use this project settings stats. I'm gonna try to just use this thing. Let me see if there is display. It's probably not gonna work. I think I used the macro because I wanted to set the main scene programmatically there. It's also not saving these ones though. And I don't remember if I tested this or not. Writing to the files. Problem is that I don't wanna override, but maybe it doesn't matter. I should have another function for this. I'm gonna build this. Let's copy this. And there's a lot of functions here. I'm gonna put the name of the function there. Actually, I think probably doesn't matter because it's always gonna be on the roots. So the project.godot file on the root of the project is gonna be the file where they cache the configurations for the project. So I thought that setting on the project settings would. I don't. The thing is, I don't remember really well. Like, I think I was trying to set on the project settings, but I don't remember if that was what I was trying to do. And it's the same with the macro here. But obviously, it's not writing this stuff to the sync file here. So that's what I'm thinking about, like how to set the things, because obviously I don't want to set manually each time. Just want to have a predefined settings. But the thing is, I'm not really sure if this approach is gonna work with the config file. I know it works for the. I think it probably will work. So I'm just gonna copy this stuff there and then remove from here. I'll do one by one. And now I'm not really sure. Because it might be like I'm thinking it might be one of those things where it's an issue because I'm building this scene on a different time that is running. So, like I think these things here, they do set the settings on the project, but it doesn't matter because it's running on a different time than the actual application is gonna run. And I'm not really sure if the config file is gonna do that. Like if that's the purpose of the just save these settings here. Obviously, this is switch just us. So it probably is the same. Display window size. So I think it is gonna save that. So, hmm. Yeah, so it wasn't saving. So I think I did just save, but I didn't test to see if it was working. So I'm just gonna. I have to see the sections. So I think that the first one is gonna be the section. Then the second one is the name of the thing. I don't know for sure. Yeah, so it should be. And then the third one is the value. Let's see if there's. So maybe I put main scene or main scene on the argument. Because this thing here is not the thing that I'm actually gonna build the projects. It's just a thing to build the scenes. Then once I have a bunch of scenes and classes, I can build projects outside by using the resources that I have here. So I'm probably gonna switch a lot the like what is the main scene so I can test different things. I think I'm gonna put this as an argument. And then it's gonna be on the application. This. Yeah, nice. So now it's working. So I'm gonna open again. I'm just gonna copy the code that I have for the doc, and then I'm gonna remove everything that's, or I'm gonna comment out the doc manager stuff and remove or change the maximum size there. Yeah, I'm gonna think about how to. I'm gonna add. I think the first thing I'm gonna do is just add it as a child. Actually, I probably add directly to the root first to see if the GUI works. Then, if the GUI works, I try to add on the navbar. Then I'll think about the logic. So this is on the script. Yeah, so I was gonna play to see if it is the main scene. But this one, it doesn't matter, I think. I'm gonna replace this one with this. So I'm gonna remove this. Just to have a starting point for the stuff that is gonna move. Yeah, so nice. So the starting point now is bigger. Or something I was thinking about changing later. And this is because of the project settings there. So I'm gonna copy the code from this. It's probably the best idea to copy the constructor first, then see what I need from the constructor. Because I mainly want to use this just for the GUI elements in the beginning. So I'm gonna have to think about the logic again anyway, I think. I'll remove this stuff from here. I think I remember it by memory. Student GUI box container. These ones are box containers. So the signals I'm gonna comment out for now. Hmm. The draw is gonna matter because on the notification draw is the parts that you draw this stuff. Oh, this is another thing that I was thinking about is whether or not you. I'm not really sure if it was a mistake to, because on a lot of these classes that I did was just copying this stuff on the that Godot already had and then changing so that it works for what I'm trying to do. And a lot of them have this add scale here, which I assume that obviously is going to be for the editor scale. So on all the situations I just removed this, and I don't know now if it was a mistake to do this. Because now obviously I don't remember which parts are we're supposed to have that scale. Because if you want to implement something that's like I'm not really sure how it works. Sure, it might is it's probably just that the logic for scaling up and down is based like this is a macro that they have on the editor, and I think by default it's gonna be one, and it's based on the editor settings. So I think once you scale, they probably have something that listens for the shortcuts or yeah shortcuts that's gonna change this value, and then because it's changing this value, it's gonna change the values of that's depend on this thing. So it's gonna either zoom in or zoom out. So now I'm not really sure if I should remove or leave this and then think about this later. It might be better to remove because then like I'm gonna have to think about this anyway later, and I might come up with a simpler approach if I like, when I get to that point. But it might be worse as well because it might be very annoying to know what's parts to scale. I think I'm gonna remove, and I'm just gonna think about this when it gets to that point. 'Cause I can probably like for I think for this kind of stuff, it's gonna fall into the same category that themes are and the shortcuts are. It's better to just sit down one time and figure out an approach that works like for most cases, and then like you concentrate the thing at the time you're gonna solve that problem. Then once you solve that, you can reuse for all the other stuff. I think that's I have to like it's not that important right now. So like it's gonna be after I have everything on this first thing that I'm creating. Then I think about this stuff like to scale. And I think like I probably should come up with an approach that works. I think if I can do that, it's gonna be better to work like from the outside of the classes. It could be something like in the same way that the theme works, where like you have a class in the beginning of the scene that's based on whatever number you put there is gonna multiply everything that has a size on the like could be something that traverses the tree, for example, and multiplies the value based on whatever you have there. Then I can make an option which would be similar to the doc context and would work on the same way. You can put a slider, just scale up and down, and then bind that to the shortcut as well. So I think I'm just gonna remove. Probably can come up with something later. Maybe actually, yeah, the thing that's like what is making me think to remove more now is that I removed on the other ones already. But I think if I went over in the beginning, I should probably just create a random variable and just put on the beginning of the class here. Because then it's easier to see which ones were. So I'm gonna do this now. Uh, actually, so this I assume is the button on the bottom there. I think I don't need this. Okay. This also I probably don't need because it's like a specific thing there that they have. I think mainly the GUI that I want. So probably need to copy the drawing function that they have. I also have this one, I think. Yeah, and then put this one. They do like this because of the enum that they use to subscribe the slots on the manager. This is gonna be the last value on the enum. And this is the difference that I'm talking about. Like they design everything to be specific to the editor. So like these are the positions of each doc there on the editor, which is different than what I'm trying to do now. I'm gonna test with this first to see if it shows anything. I have to put this on the thing as well. I think rec2 is a struct probably. Yeah. And control I don't need. Does it have here? I'm not gonna use a static thing here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do like this first to make it easier to think about. But I'm probably gonna make it as a pointer or as a vector. I think probably a vector because easier. Because obviously it has to depend. I don't want to have a fixed amount of docs. It's gonna depend on each thing. This error is kind of weird with the label because I just copy from there, so I'm not sure what's going on. Might be because of the no, but this is being initialized on the container, on the constructor. So I'm not really sure what's going on. It's saying true using line. I think I'm just gonna, because I'm probably not gonna use this anyway. I'm just gonna put the number there. Or maybe because of the, I didn't put the, I didn't include the label. I don't know if it is gonna be here. Oh. Hmm. I think the main thing that I'm thinking about now is like if it is worth it to follow this approach that I'm thinking about of thinking about the classes outside of the doc. Like thinking about the doc manager as in the beginning as something that just switches the nodes on the scene tree, and then I leave the logic for each component on its own class, instead of thinking about the doc manager as like the layout placeholder first, and then putting the classes inside of the layout. And I think it's probably better to think about the doc manager as the layout first. I mean, that's the reason why the first time that I thought about this, it was very confusing to figure out the best approach. But I do think that thinking about it in that way is probably better. Because the purpose of the doc manager should be to structure the layouts in the beginning. But I think that's the reason why it was hard to figure out in the beginning is that, like, if I wanted to have the flexibility for having different layouts for different functions, different starting layouts, then I need to put this logic on the doc manager, and makes it harder to think about because the logic has to be generic. So, but I do think like the more that I think about it, it's probably the best approach because it makes more sense. So like the rigid part thing, I think it makes sense the way that I was talking about. So like everything that I want to make it rigid on the scene, I don't put any. I don't make it related to the logic of the doc manager. So I just add normally the same way that I was adding before. So like just adding as a child as you normally would, and then the position on the layout is going to determine on the whatever state you set on the actual thing you're putting. But then anything that I want to make as a dockable container, then I have a functionality inside of the class that is going to deal with that. But I think I need to make it, I need to think about it in a way, I need to think about the state of the class on the doc manager as the structure of the layout. And then based on that structure, so like I have a function, for example, in the beginning that initializes the structure of the layout. Like you could have, for example, how many docs you have, or how many docs I want. Then like a function that based on how many docs you want, it creates the docs with the indexes. I think this approach is better, probably. Yeah, so this is the part that I have to think about. Like it's gonna be a tree data structure, and it's gonna be the reason why it's confusing is because it's the same problem with the division of space. So when you're using a bounding volume hierarchy to optimize or to calculate collisions, to optimize division on space, you're basically dividing the space using a tree data structure because that makes it faster to search for positions of nodes, like is space partitioning. It's kind of similar to the reason why binary search makes it faster to search on an array. You're limiting the scope of search based on the structure of the tree. So like the state of the tree, the logic inside of each node of the tree determines the navigation path inside of that space. And here I think with the layout it's pretty much the same thing. So like you're gonna have a tree that has two different types of nodes. One is the split container and the other one is the dock. The thing that makes it very confusing is that the functionality of the split container depends on the children, and in some situations you want to have, like depending on what kind of layout you want, you're gonna have nested split containers as children of each other. And the decision to what kind of split you want is the thing that is confusing because you have to think about how to restructure the tree based on the movements of the dock. But I think you can. Yeah, so there's two different things. One is the algorithm to create the initial layout structure, and the other one is the other one is to switch nodes on that structure. Because I think once you have the structure, you don't change the layout. The way that they did there on the plugin, you do change, but I think it's easier to think about this in the beginning. Yeah, I think the hardest part is changing the layout. So I think this approach is probably better in the beginning. So you think about it as a fixed layout, and then the dragging and dropping is just switching the nodes. So in the example, the animation, instead of adding another one or changing the split of the layouts, you would just swap the nodes. The from would go to the place you're dragging it to, and the place you're dragging it to would go to the from, and then have a fixed layout in the beginning. I think that way is probably easier to think about. Then maybe later, after I figure this way out, then I think about something that you can also, like another algorithm that allows you to change the structure of the layouts. So add splits and stuff like that. But I think that probably wouldn't make sense because the thing that would make sense is changing the direction of the split. That might make sense. It wouldn't make sense to add or remove. Maybe remove does make sense as well. But removing, I think, is easier because you can hide the components from the tree, so you don't need to remove it from the tree. You just call hide and then it stops showing. I think this way is easier to think about in the beginning. So like I would have an algorithm, so initialize the doc manager, then have an algorithm that's the question is like how do you determine what the layout looks like? Like how to what is the best way to specify like what kind of layout you want? Because obviously I can make it like an integer that would determine like how many spaces you want inside of the layout, but then that wouldn't allow me to put. So I need two things. One is the amount of components you want on the layout, and the other one is the direction of the splits. The direction of the splits is the thing that is very confusing, I think. So I think probably the easiest way you should think about from left to right. An integer that determines amounts of containers, and so maybe it would be like a hash. Hash should be a vector of key value pairs, vector of pairs. Hmm. Yeah, but from left to right doesn't make sense because then there's no way to encode. Obviously, I need a way to stay vertical or horizontal on the splits, but I need to think about like how it should stay based on the amount of components, and where to put the vertical and horizontal splits. Yeah, but I think so. I'm gonna think about it from this perspective first. And switching the nodes is the easiest one if I do it like this. And the hardest part is the algorithm to change the layout. So if you switch the nodes and you don't change the structure of the tree, then it's very easy. The issue is what if you want to change the layouts? So there's two additional things. One is changing layout structure, and the other is changing the layout structure. I forgot. Just there was something that I was thinking about. It was something to do with the direction of the nodes. I guess I'm not really sure if that was what I was thinking about, but like, what happens with the tree structure when nodes are switched on dynamic layouts? I think it was something else that I was thinking about. Oh no, it was the tabs. Yeah, it was the tabs. Because I think that here it makes it easier to move them because it's grabbing the tab, the component by the tab. So this is the thing that is kind of confusing. Like when you move one that has a horizontal split and you move it to another place that makes it a vertical or vice versa. How do you think about this? I think here they are making based on the tab container, the logic. I think that I need to think about the layout. But if you move, I guess I need to figure this out, like how because it is changing the layout structure, and it does feel feel more natural to do this. Because I'm imagining like when you want to move a component that is on the bottom, for example, it should be on the side of another one. If you can't change the layout structure, then you can't do that. Obviously, you can just swap the parts of the tree. But I think it is better probably to allow for swapping the nodes, like swapping the structure or changing the layout structure. So I'm thinking like the fixed parts are done outside. Then you have the subsets. So like the doc manager is always the roots of the tree, and the logic of the doc manager determines the boundary. It has a parent node that determines the space that is going to be made of dockable or dynamic nodes. But I think probably I have to start with the only question that I'm kind of hesitant to start with this one, which is an algorithm that determines the layout structure based on how many docks you want and whether or not they're going to be vertical or horizontal, is if this is going to change if I want to implement this later. So if I want a dynamic layout structure, then is it a waste of time to do this one because it's going to be a completely different algorithm? And I think probably it will. So I have to think about like, what is the best way to create a tree data structure. So it's basically the algorithm, the beginning. The decision to change a vertical or a horizontal split to vertical. I think this is one of the questions. And I think that on the plugin they make it based on a half. So I think that I can start with this one. So I start with the algorithm that creates a layout structure based on a number of components you want, the space you have. And that's what I need to clarify. So I'm gonna see, so see if I have because first, so I'm not really sure if it's better to start with this one to test, or if I should focus on the drag and drop right now. Maybe, I think probably starting with the drag and drop might be better than starting with this context here, because it feels more natural to use the drag and drop the same way that they are doing here. At least that's how I think like. And the problem with the doc is the context is gonna involve the other class. So it might be more confusing in the beginning to figure that out. It's more steps. So like the drag and drop is based on the macro that I already have on the FS view, an example. So I was thinking that I can get based on the point, which is what they do on the plugin. So based on the points, you do the logic to see if you can drop. So I can get the size of the dockable area. So I should probably have a dock root or something like this here. Be like a control. Yeah, so I separate. Hmm. The downside of this is that it has to be coupled, the dynamic components, but I think it doesn't matter that much. So I think most situations what you want to have is like maybe you have a fixed component on the side and a fixed component on the navbar and maybe on the footer. But the dynamic components are most of the time probably are gonna be on the same, like they're gonna be on the same 3D space. I think that's what makes the most sense in most situations probably. And the question is whether or not does that matter. I think it does if I do it like this. Because the decision like how do you limit this space? But I think it doesn't matter that much. Maybe I don't need this actually. Because the only thing that matters is the containers that are subscribed. Yeah, so I have to think about the data structure that's gonna be used to manage the layouts and the movement of the layouts as a separate thing that is done based on the algorithms on the doc manager class. So it's like a thing that is like coupled, is like a subtree from the main tree of the scene. Because I can do the logic based on the names, so I can find, and also, yeah, because like this is gonna be the roots, so I don't have that annoying thing about finding the root in the beginning. I can find the nodes by name or by the states of the class. So like when I subscribe, I can use this, I think. And then based on the names, I find the nodes, and then from the nodes, I build the structure of the layouts. So the layout's gonna be a tree data structure, I think. And it's like a tree of split containers and control containers. And the question is, how do you build the initial states? What is the algorithm that you build the initial state based on the arguments that determine like how the layout's gonna look like? And then the algorithm that changes the layout based on the drag and drop logic. I think tabs, I think about it later. Once the hardest part is the tree stuff, and I was gonna change the layouts and then the names as well, because like each endpoint, which is like a container on the layout, has to have a specific name, so I can use those names. So like I run the algorithm to build the initial layout structure. Then based on the numbers, for example, of components or containers that I have there, each one's gonna have a standard name that I can use from the other nodes to put them, or maybe actually it's probably better to just, yeah, it's better to make it based on the class. So I have an integer instead of a name. So I keep track of the indexes of the containers. Probably using, yeah, but the problem is with a hash map is not, can serialize. I need to think about something that I can use that is simple to bootstrap the complex state, because like I can create a bridge between one runtime and the other based on the simple structure that I can use to save on the class that are going, like for example, let's say we have a vector of indices of the containers. That's going to be very easy to cache on the property of the class. It's going to allow me to serialize that. Then from that, I can bootstrap the more complex stuff based on that information. So I think that's how I have to find this what this the simplest data structure is to get the initial state of the what the layout is going to be, and then if I can do that from that state, then I can use hash maps later or more complex things based on the initial structure. So probably doesn't make sense to have a root. I just make the logic based on. But I have to think about. So I'm gonna stop streaming now, and I'm gonna think about what's like. What does it look like? Because the thing that like the tree structure is gonna be directly correlated with the split container control relationship. So the question whether or not I need to have like a subspace on this class that is going to be the roots, and they have to be connected because they're going to be a subtree that has to be a subsection of the main tree, like a subtree from the main scene tree. It depends on how this relationship works when you're moving the nodes on the layout, and that's what I have to figure out, because it depends on how the tree structure is going to change based on the dragging event. So I'm going to show for dragging. I think I'm gonna implement the drag and drop first because it's probably easier. It's not dragging or something. Yeah, this macro here, that's basically what I have to use. So here I'm thinking about like you put the root of the tree. I think for each one you need to call the macro. So I need to spend more time, but I think on the first the from. So the true is gonna be the one that has the callback functions, which is gonna be the doc manager class. So you have to define these functions here on the doc manager, or any class you want to implement the drag and drop, and they're gonna represent the parts of the cycle. So what you want to happen on each part of the cycle. And I think the from is the object that is gonna trigger the event. So I think for each container, each node on the tree, I need to call this macro and then subscribe to this thing. So I should probably put it inside of the function. So I have a function that creates the docs, and then inside of there, I put this one. So after I create the object, there's going to be one component of the layout. I subscribe And then for each one, I get the logic from the plugin. So I change this so that it works. But I think that's from what I remember, they do it based on the position of the mouse. So you get the position of the mouse, then you get the minimum position of the thing you're moving, and then you do it based on the half of the size. So you calculate based on X and Y, obviously, and that's how you decide where you're gonna put the new split. The question is how to determine if I don't do tabs, how to determine when to put the grabbing, the starting. There's also the events there. So I have this macro, and then you have the 3 different functions I have to put to determine what happens on each part of the cycle. And then you have the notification, you can put stuff as well. Let's drag begin and drag ends. But I think for these ones don't matter that much, I think. And it doesn't show anything. So probably there's something missing. We should look for the rectangles here. Because they're probably gonna do the drawing instead of a gear input function or here. I think they do the drawing on this function. And create the rectangles. This is probably gonna be more annoying to implement in the beginning. And is not as good as well. As the dragging is definitely better. And I think that making with the tabs is easier to drag first. So maybe I'll implement with the tab first. Then I see if I remove later. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop streaming now because I have to spend time thinking about this. The main thing to figure out is the tree structure. So I'm pretty sure that's what I'm gonna try to do in the beginning. So I'm gonna focus on the grabbing first. I have to see if I can implement a simple drag. So maybe I think you should probably create like I should mainly create a split container with 2 children, or like probably 2 split containers and then 2 children, and then like as a base on this class, like hard codes these ones. Then I implement the dragging functionality based on this. Then once I have the dragging functionality, then I'll think about the logic for how to build it. But I basically need the first thing to do is an algorithm that's going to take probably a number. I need to think about like what's data structure to use to encode the information. Like, what is the easiest way to think about it in your mind of what's the containers are gonna look like depending on the. So the easiest way is the easiest one is obviously the amount of containers you want. So obviously on this scene would be, and it has to be only the containers that are going to be dockable. So removing the nav and the icon sidebar would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it would be 4. But the hardest part is figuring out what is the most intuitive way to determine which splits are going to be vertical and which ones are going to be horizontal. I think if you make from left and right, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that this is going to depend on the way that the tree is going to work. So that's why it's kind of hard to know. This has to be, so the first one would be a number, which is like the amount of things, should be 4, this case, 2, 3, 4. And then the second, I think, would be something that has to encode what kind of splits there are between them. I think I need to create this algorithm first. It takes these values, and then it builds the split containers. It builds a tree data structure that represents the layout. Then I have another algorithm that is going to change that structure. So this one is probably going to be, like the structure is probably going to be a value on the class. Like I have a roots node for the tree. Maybe I should do another class for this, like create a class that is kind of like a tree. And then I use that as the roots. And then I have to think about the, like what this class will look like. So the algorithm is going to take that information, is going to transform that into a tree of split containers, which represents the layouts. Then each layout has a unique index, which I also get from the beginning there, from the algorithm. And then I have functions that are going to put the classes on those containers. Yeah, these ones are going to be annoying. So I'm probably going to have to make it based on the names. Yeah, so I think making based on the name of the class is probably going to be the way. So I make it similar to the way that I did on the icon sidebar, because that's the easiest way to cache the information as members of this class. So I'm thinking probably like an index and the name of the class that I want to be. So the algorithm sets the state on the class of the indexes of each container on the layouts, and the other value would be the name of the class that should be on each container. Then on the constructor of this, I check to see if the values exist on the class. If they do, then I build everything based on them. Like I run the algorithm and stuff like that. If they don't, then I don't do anything. Maybe I have like a default layout. So I build the default layouts in the beginning, and then if they don't have anything, yeah, with no classes. So I'm gonna think about this upstream. How to build this tree. Maybe figure out the drag and drop first. Like I'm gonna hard code a simple way. This is the thing. Then think about. I might change this order because I'm not really sure if it's like this one's gonna matter for this and stuff like that. Yeah, but the main thing to figure out is how to structure the tree, take into consideration the way that the split container works, and whether or not the classes have to be connected on the same subtree, or I can subscribe different classes on different parts of the tree inside of the manager, and it's not gonna matter because the only thing that matters is the the algorithm and how it changes the tree in order to change the layout. Yeah, so I'm gonna think about this upstream. Next time I'm gonna continue to work on this stuff here until I have I think I'm gonna shoot for something similar to the plugin, this plugin here, but obviously on C++, and it's gonna be the roots of the root of everything that I have, probably everything that is a GUI scene or an application scene. I'm gonna put this class, and I probably gonna create like standard layouts for each one, or standard layouts that I think about. They are probably gonna be the best ones to have. Then once I figure out something like this and I finish the class, I'm probably gonna focus on the other two, which is the one to write the files and the other one to work as a terminal. But probably next stream I'm gonna continue to work on this doc manager class. So see you then.